Welcome back to Indus News live from Lahore. I'm Osman Lone. Well, we start in Syria. After a week of fierce fighting, Russia and Turkey have agreed a ceasefire in the Idlib de-escalation zone. Fighting in northwestern Syria has calmed in the past 24 hours after Russia's truce initiative. The Syrian government and its allied forces did not retaliate to the militants' airstrikes in the Latakia region. Russia has called on militant leaders to end hostilities. The recent violence in Idlib and Hama provinces, the biggest military escalation since last summer. Scores of people have been killed, with tens of thousands forced to flee their homes. Germany will host an intra-Afghan dialogue between the government and the Taliban. The exact date and venue for such a meeting is yet to be agreed. On his visit to Kabul, German envoy Markus Potzel discussed the peace process with Afghanistan's President Ashraf Ghani. Potzel says at least 60 people will represent the Afghan government and the Taliban. He added the European Union is committed to helping end the war in Afghanistan, and he also held meetings with senior Afghan politicians. Over 300,000 people have been evacuated from India's coastal state of Gujarat ahead of Cyclone Vayu. The Western Railways cancelled 70 trains as it headed for the Gujarat coastline. Overnight, the Cyclone Vayu changed its course slightly and now appears to be moving into the sea and not inland. But the threat persists, with the storm's diameter spreading over 900 kilometers. The cyclone is expected to hit the Indian coastline between Porbandar and Mahua with over 180 km/h wind speeds. The National Disaster Management Authority is sending 52 teams inside Gujarat and Diu. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has announced the country has already purchased the S-400 missile system from Russia. The missiles will be delivered in July. This comes ahead of Ankara's negotiation with Washington scheduled for today. The US has threatened to drop Turkey from the F-35 program should it go ahead with the purchase. It's already suspended a joint F-35 fighter jet program and threatened Turkey with further economic sanctions. President Erdogan says he hopes to resolve the situation with the US in a meeting with President Trump by the end of June. Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan will visit Kyrgyzstan to attend the meeting of the Council of the Heads of State in the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. Kyrgyz President Sooronbay Jeenbekov has invited the Pakistan's Prime Minister to attend the meeting. Khan will address two sessions of the summit. The Council of Heads of State is the highest forum of the SCO. It devises strategy, prospects and priorities of the bloc. Japan's Prime Minister Shinzo Abe has held talks with Iran's President Hassan Rouhani in Tehran. His visit is meant to diffuse tensions between the United States and Iran. Shinzo Abe is the first Japanese PM to visit Iran in over 40 years. Before Abe's visit, Japan's Foreign Minister Taro Kono held a closed-doors meeting with his Iranian counterpart Javad Zarif. Ahead of the visit, President Rouhani said the whole country believes the main culprit is America. The United States imposed old sanctions on Iran a year after pulling out of the 2015 nuclear deal. US President Donald Trump has declined to set a deadline for levying tariffs on another $325 billion worth of Chinese goods. Speaking to reporters, Trump called his relationship with Beijing good but testy. He said manufacturers are pulling out of China under pressure from US tariffs. President Trump has warned of extra duties on Chinese exports if a deal can't be done at this month's G20 summit.
The sanctions are on. China has actually been helping us quite a bit, and despite our trade differences right now, we thought we had a deal, and unfortunately they decided that they were going to change the deal, and they can't do that with me, but something's going to happen.
Now in Mexico, it says it's begun deploying its National Guard to the country's southern border. This comes after Mexico signed a migration control deal with the United States. Mexico's Foreign Minister Marcelo Ebrard said the deployment will progress rapidly, with many things happening in the last 45 days. Mexican President Andrés Manuel López Obrador plans to sell the former presidential airplane and other aircraft, and says the sale would help fund the new U.S. migration control deal. In the settlement, Mexico agreed to control the flow of people from Central America. The deal avoided U.S. import tariffs of 5% on all Mexican goods. In the United Kingdom, the government has defeated a cross-motion party aiming to block the country's exit from the EU without a deal. MPs voted 309 to 298 against the proposal to bar the government from a no-deal Brexit. Despite the House of Commons' defeat, the Labour Party has pledged to fight attempts to leave the EU without an agreement. Labour's Brexit spokesman Keir Starmer says the party will protect the country from a no-deal Brexit. Britain is scheduled to leave the EU on October 31st after being given a 6-month extension. And staying with the UK, the contenders for the Conservative leadership face their first real test in a ballot of Tory MPs. The secret ballot will take place in the Commons, with the result expected later in the day. Candidates who fail to get at least 17 votes will be eliminated. Follow-up ballots are scheduled for June 18th, 19th and 20th, and the top two will move to a runoff ballot of Tory party members. The winner is expected to be announced on July 22nd. Brexit and arguments over a deal or no deal have dominated the contest. Well, one of those leadership candidates, Prime Ministerial hopeful Sajid Javid, has called his rival Boris Johnson yesterday's news. Javid claimed only he had an honest plan to deliver Brexit by the end of October. He said voters felt politicians were incompetent because the UK has still not left the European Union. Britain's Interior Minister called his rival Boris Johnson a tale of the past.
Have won both the Champions League.
I'd say I'm a change candidate. Yeah, Boris Johnson is yesterday's news, right? In that he's been around in politics for a while, he's achieved a lot, and he's probably, he's still got a big role to play. But I think if we are trying to connect with the next generation and move forward as a country, then I think it's time for the next generation with a bold new agenda.
Now, the US has named Donald Booth as its special envoy to find a peaceful political solution in Sudan. The Sudanese Foreign Ministry has summoned the British ambassador to protest at his remarks on political developments inside the country. The ambassador Irfan Sadiq used a tweet to criticize the military crackdown on protesters. Shops and restaurants have reopened after demonstrators called off a nationwide strike. Earlier, the opposition alliance agreed to suspend its civil disobedience campaign and resume talks with the military. Ahead of the meeting, the Military Council has agreed to release political prisoners as a confidence-building measure. It says it arrested soldiers linked to last week's Khartoum sit-in massacre. The UN Security Council has called on the ruling military and protesters to resolve the crisis without further violence. Now, Beijing has accused the US or falsely accused China and Russia of spreading misinformation on President Trump. The US National Security Advisor John Bolton has claimed China and Russia are spreading fake news about friction between Trump and his advisors. China's Foreign Ministry spokesman Geng Shuang says these reports come from the American press themselves. Geng responded to a query about ties with Russia, saying attempts to split the two countries will fail. He said Russia and China stand firmly against unilateralism, protectionism and bullying. Former UN Chief Ban Ki-moon has urged nuclear powers to be serious about disarmament. He warned decades of work on international arms control was in danger of failing. Ban Ki-moon told the UN Security Council Washington's withdrawal pullout from the JCPOA sends the wrong signal to Pyongyang. He warned the entire architecture of arms control is now in danger of collapsing. Global disarmament efforts suffered a setback in February when the US scrapped the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty, also known as the INF. Russia responded by suspending its role in the treaty. Ban added nuclear arms control is central to the role played by the UN Security Council. Now, the death toll in flash floods following torrential rains in central and southern China has risen to 19. Thousands are stranded while 1.4 million people have been affected. Officials say flooding has destroyed 10,800 hectares of crops in Jiangxi province. Rescue missions are underway to evacuate trapped residents. The floods have toppled more than 1,300 houses. The rains have caused losses to the economy worth over $380 million, and heavy rains continue to sweep most parts of the region. Meteorologists are warning of an increased risk of landslides and flooding. Well, we'll be back with more news after this short break. Do stay with us. Welcome back. Now, the Democratic Republic of Congo's Ebola outbreak is spilling into Uganda, and a 5-year-old boy has already lost his life to the disease. More in this report.
The Ebola epidemic has claimed over 1,300 lives in eastern Congo. Now it has crossed the border into Uganda. A 5-year-old boy became the epidemic's first cross-border casualty. 2 more cases have been confirmed. The Democratic Republic of Congo and Uganda have deeply entwined border communities. Often children who live on the one side of the border go to school on the other side. There has also been increased traffic from the Congo into Uganda because of militant activity.
The conflict has made people run from where Ebola started to this side of the border. We don't know if they have come over with Ebola or not. So if they don't continue to check people at the border, it will spread. So let this screening continue.
The DRC is scheduled to hold long-delayed elections on 23rd of December. Unrest is expected as the elections draw closer. There are fears that this will cause increased migrant traffic from the Ebola epicenter into Uganda.
As the world marks a day against child labour, children in Nigeria are still forced into work. 43% of the country's children aged between 5 and 10 are victims of the practice. Indus News has this report.
As the Nigerian delegation attends the International Labour Conference, its children back home continue to suffer. Nigeria has the worst forms of child labour, including working in quarries, sex industry and armed conflict.
It's something that the government really needs to focus on in terms of their feeding, in terms of their education, in terms of their clothing. But if all of this is not catered for, that's why you see them on the streets.
There are approximately 72 million laboring children between the ages of 5 to 17 in Africa.
I don't have money. That's why we are just demanding to sell all those things to support me, so to raise them up. So that's why they are used to go and sell bread in the nest. So after coming, we will manage the money to cook food.
Globally, 152 million children engaged in labor are at risk of physical, mental, emotional and sexual abuse.
Now, scores of Kenyans have protested against a proposed power coal station because the project is located near a popular tourist spot and UNESCO heritage site. Indus News has this report.
Protesters in Nairobi have slammed plans to build a coal power plant near the Lamu archipelago. Not only is the archipelago a popular tourist spot, it also hosts a UNESCO World Heritage Site and vibrant marine life. Demands were made for Kenya to make a complete shift to green renewable energy.
To know that Kenyans want renewable energy projects because not just for the community where they're going to suffer from all these other impacts, but also because it's Kenyans that are going to be bearing the cost of paying all these millions of dollars of shillings to the few people that are bringing these projects.
The 981 megawatt facility has also been censured by experts. The US-based Institute for Energy Economics and Financial Analysis has warned electricity from the plant will cost 10 times more than estimated. It also warned Kenya's economic growth rate was too slow to justify such an investment.
We operate actually in an energy surplus here in Kenya, and our industrial consumption of power is actually, the demand of it is met already. We actually don't need extra investments around fossil fuels, and there's actually the capacity for Kenya to invest in renewable energy.
If the project gets the go-ahead, Kenya will have to pay for it in $360 million installments annually over a 25-year period. The plant is mostly being financed by China.
Now, as the world continues to fight climate change, a city in Denmark called Copenhagen is an environmentally friendly waste treatment plant. And what really sets it apart is that it's a hybrid between building and landscape. More in this report.
Copenhagen is an emission-free waste treatment plant with a dry ski slope and much more on its roof. Jake Ingels, the plant's architect, said he wanted to design a facility people would welcome to their neighborhoods. Its slanted roof offers nearly half a kilometer of ski slopes, hiking trails, climbing walls and restaurants.
Amagerbakke is at its summit. Almost 100 meters tall. You have like almost half a kilometer of skiing. It is really sort of a man-made mountain of activity. We want the world to know about this so that the people will come and try this new kind of hybrid between a building and a landscape.
Copenhagen's ski obstacle course has even grabbed the attention of Jesper Jalder, a Swedish Olympic skier. He says seeing the slope on screen and actually being there are vastly different experiences.
First time I saw it was on Netflix, maybe like everybody else, but it's way cooler to see it in real life. It's quite a mountain actually. I mean, this building made it so easy for me to figure out what to do for this project, because it's not really about what tricks I do, it's more like actually skiing down a building. That's a cool thing.
Copenhagen burns waste from 600,000 residents and 68,000 businesses to produce electricity. Its architect Jake Ingels hopes it can show people sustainable architecture can be exciting.
Now, not all wounds of war leave a visible scar. While cuts might heal over a matter of time, a fifth of the world's war-torn population grapples with a psychological trauma that takes a lifetime, if ever, to heal. More in this report.
Since the end of the World War II, some 70 million people have fled war and violence in their native countries. In 2016, the number of ongoing armed conflicts reached an all-time high. 12% of the world's population wakes up to an active war zone every single day. The psychosocial insecurities and the physical vulnerabilities of war mar millions of lives.
In this study, we found that 1 in 5 people in conflict-affected areas of the world have one of the following 5 mental health conditions: depression, anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder, bipolar disorder, or schizophrenia.
Majority of the world's population living in conflict zones suffers from mild mental health conditions. For severe conditions, the prevalence was 5%.
Which in the middle of a conflict is extremely dangerous, because in a conflict one needs to survive, and for that one needs to function well. Also, after the conflict is over, society needs functioning people to recover, and so this is very important.
But the lack of mental health workers to treat the patients is making matters worse.
There is one mental health worker for every 10,000 people in Syria. There is one mental health worker for every 50,000 people in Afghanistan. There is one mental health worker for every 100,000 people in South Sudan. So you see the gap. 1 in 10 persons needs a service, but there is one mental health worker for every 100,000. even without the conflict, the gap is huge.
The rates of depression and anxiety in conflict settings increases with age. Women are more vulnerable to depression caused by miseries of armed conflict.
Now, an experiment has been carried out on a tiny Central American fish in Dijon in eastern France. It found that the tropical fish suffers heartache if it's separated from its male partner. Researchers at the University of Burgundy trained female fish to use their mouths to open two small boxes placed in their tanks. The positive box contained fish food, while the negative one was left empty. The boxes are the black and white lids to help the fish tell them apart. And the study showed female fish spent more time lifting the black lids when the favored males were in the tanks. Well, who knew even fish could fall in love? But now to business. Shares in the Asia Pacific have traded longer following an overnight fall on Wall Street. Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index fell in early trading after massive protests against the extradition bill from China. Stocks on mainland China followed suit. Over in Japan, the Nikkei fell back 0.46% over a slide of shares of the Apple supplier Japan Display. South Korea's Kospi also tumbled following the drop of chipmaker SK Hynix. Oil prices floated sit-down 5-month lows due to higher US crude inventories and bleak demand outlook. France and Germany have won their latest matches in the Women's World Cup. The hosts France beat Norway 2-1, while Germany snatched a 1-0 victory over Spain. Playing at the Allianz Riviera, France took a narrow victory against the Norwegians. Valerie Govin opened the scoring in the 46th minute, to be equalised by Wendy Renard's own goal. Striker Eugène Le Sommer regained the lead for France with a 76th minute penalty. France leads Group A with 6 points from 2 games. Midfielder Sarah Dabritz took Germany to 1-0 victory against Spain. Dabritz scored against the run of play with Spain dominating possession. Germany's next Group B game is against South Africa on Monday. And now we'll look at the weather around the world. Well, that's all for now, but do stay tuned for further updates on Indus News.